why boards ignore CISOs, why boards ignore you, how to fix it. And I guess sort of seeing that thing I recognise, which is this sense of absolute responsibility and ownership, and feeling like you're carrying the weight of this organisation on your shoulders. That's what I saw with cybersecurity professionals. So as you know, I was vice chair of the UK Cybersecurity Council. I mean, that's the chartered body for professionals.
Why is it that the IT crowd stereotype, if you will, is still kind of impacting the CISO's chance of a credible and effective seat at the table, even as we head into 2026?
It's that kind of gap around communication. Now, the thing is, it does not mean that cyber professionals, still less CISOs, can't be great communicators. They absolutely can, and I know loads of them. But the fact is that you're kind of up against, you're fighting for influence with other senior people. If only we can kind of quiet our minds and open up to what other people are trying to tell us, or quite often not trying to tell us, but we're going to hear it anyway when we're listening. So it's a superpower for any professional, particularly for cyber people. And cybersecurity, where you have this level of integrity and personal responsibility, which I don't see in any other profession, in all honesty. And that, God, I mean, that's gold dust. Why aren't companies doing everything they can to look after these guys, It's like they've got their own kind of little private army and they don't even know about it,
How can they extend online safety, protecting the broader civil society?
I worked on the Online Safety Act, well, when it was the Online Safety Bill, with colleagues. We did all of the kind of technical advisory that led to that piece of legislation, which was quite groundbreaking, actually. I think Britain was the first country worldwide that passed legislation regulating online platforms for the first time.
The CEO says to you, we have insurance, we don't need any more tech. How do you respond to that?
Well, the insurance will cover some of the costs. So, it'll cover the cost of cleanup, but all it does is that it doesn't cover the costs of the opportunity cost, does it? You are tied up. All your best, most important people are tied up in this kind of horrific thing, and it goes on for years, as we know. So good luck to you, CEO.
But what's the biggest lie boards tell themselves about their own resilience?
We're doing fine. Nobody's fine, for goodness sake. Everybody should feel uncomfortable. Feeling uncomfortable is okay, actually. That's the truth. Try to be the advocate who's been on the other side of the table and might be able to help them speak the board's language.
This is the Secure Cyber Connect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information, cybersecurity, technology and talent acquisition professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives and offer advice and guidance. Our topic on this episode will be why are boards ignoring CISOs and how to fix it. We'll talk about cyber governance, CISO board reporting, cyber resilience and boardroom influence. Today we're thrilled to be joined by Jessica Figueras. Jessica is the co-founder of CXB, a non-profit network that supports boards to strengthen the oversight of cybersecurity. She's also non-executive director of the University of Westminster. Previously, she was vice chair and founding trustee at the UK Cybersecurity Council and CEO of cybersecurity consultancy Pioneer, and chair of trustees at NCT, the UK's largest charity for parents. Jessica has spent most of her career as an experienced technology strategist and government advisor, working at the intersection of tech, government and civil society across the fields of cyber, trust, online safety, risk, regulation and social impact. Jessica, welcome to the Secure Cyber Connect podcast and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, it's great to be here.
So we'll kick off really by getting a very brief high-level overview from you on some of the key themes that we'll be exploring in our discussions today.
Okay, well, I guess the first one is about, you've introduced the topic already, haven't you? Kind of why boards ignore CISOs, why boards ignore you, how to fix it. So I'm really, really interested in the questions that kind of come up when we have two groups of people who have completely different jobs and different ways of looking at the world. And, problems happen. because this is a classic example. CISOs are one group of people, one way looking at the world, and board directors, particularly non-executive directors, are another. And we have kind of challenges and conflicts there, which honestly are putting all of our businesses, our charities at risk right now. So we've got to sort of find a way of bridging that gap, and improving that communication. So I hope we're going to be talking about that. I guess just more generally, I mean, as you've introduced me, I describe myself as working at the intersection of various different kind of industries and areas and even jobs. And I guess I'm always going to be an advocate for, in your career, taking a broader view, and taking time out to do really, really different things, expose yourself to different types of challenges, different groups of people. And, I think it makes you better as a cybersecurity person.
Absolutely. And a couple of icebreakers usually with our guests. One of the typical questions we tend to ask is maybe if you'd be kind enough to share something that you're proud of or excited about that isn't typically found on your LinkedIn profile, for example.
Well, it's not necessarily something I'm proud or excited about, but it's just a fact about me, which is the entire other side to my career, which doesn't show up on my LinkedIn profile, which is my musical career. So yeah, don't tend to talk about it much there, but I play lots of different musical instruments. So I currently play the oboe in a symphony orchestra. I play the double bass in a jazz band, and a folk band. I do a whole bunch of other things as well. I sing in the opera, all sorts of stuff. So yes, that's my parallel secret career. Unfortunately, it's not one that pays any mortgages, but it's fun.
That's incredible. And is that something that you attribute to sort of maintaining balance and mental resilience?
Yeah, I'm not sure about balance, just because it means is that I literally never have any downtime whatsoever. So my family would definitely say like, no, not balance. But yeah, mental resilience, definitely. I think sometimes, I mean, we all get this, don't we, at work? We can get like really tunnel vision, can't we? And we can, get sort of so caught up in different situations and positions, and it can make us kind of quite hard. It's hard to see the wood for the trees sometimes. So I find it's really useful to do things in your life which stretch different mental faculties, and yeah, playing music is that for me. It's just a time when I can be with other people, work as part of a team, a collective. You don't have to talk. You don't have, we all do so much talking now, don't we? Yeah, it's really nice. And at other times in my life also, I've done, lots of charity volunteering. I did counselling for a while. And again, that was just a different way of kind of seeing people, and working with people just in listening mode, not giving solutions. Tech is so solution oriented, isn't it? People are always asking us what to do, aren't they? Yeah, it's nice to do some other things sometimes.
And look, was there a point, typically, maybe an event or a challenge that you faced in your career or even outside that maybe shaped your views on cyber?
Yeah, I mean, lots, right? Lots. I guess one is maybe a sort of series of events. The other is okay. So a significant challenge. Well, the first board I joined was a large charity in the UK, and I became chair of the board when it was going through a really, really, really difficult period, and it was on a personal level, it was, yeah, I mean, it made a big impact. It took its toll. It was very, very, very stressful. I mean, it affected my health, um, and I was chair of the board, right? I was on the org chart. You're kind of top of the tree. Nobody's more senior than you. Does that make you feel great? Like, hey, I'm the boss? No, it does not. You're carrying this weight of responsibility, and I saw particularly the CEO and his team as well, just, yeah, carrying that responsibility for this organization and its survival on your shoulders, that really, really takes its toll. So I guess that was a kind of a formative event, not necessarily anything to do with cybersecurity. Then I guess now, sort of a few years down the line, having like working in cybersecurity in a much more, working with practitioners, working with cybersecurity professionals, and starting to hear the stories, about that we all know, right? The burnout, the 20-hour days, and then that was bad enough, but then starting to hear the stories about the people who are being fired after there was a breach, and seeing lots of those stories, and like good people just being laid off just because the new private equity owners needed to be a bit more profitable, like off you go. And I guess sort of seeing that thing I recognise, which is this sense of absolute responsibility and ownership, and feeling like you're carrying the weight of this organisation on your shoulders. That's what I saw with cybersecurity professionals. So as you know, I was vice chair of the UK Cybersecurity Council. I mean, that's the professional, chartered body for professionals. So, we kind of looked at the profession in that way in terms of sort of skills and credibility, capability. But I guess all of these events just really made me reflect about like the sort of values of the profession, and how unique it is and how unusual, in that everybody in cybersecurity, no matter how senior or junior they are, they carry this weight of responsibility. And and it's such a high integrity profession. I think it's just full of people who see the dangers and want to protect their organization, and really push themselves out there, and burn out in the process, because they're defending, right? So yeah, so it's, I think all of these things together, um, I think have left me so passionate about defending and supporting this profession, which I've come to absolutely love. On all honesty, although I'm not a technical cybersecurity practitioner, it feels like my second home. It is a brilliant community. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And talk a little bit about some of the topics that we mentioned at the intro, and the influence gap, for example. You yourself have said that cyber professionals are often the most knowledgeable about what's going to happen in the future, yet more often than not, they have the least influence in the room. Why is it that the IT crowd stereotype, if you will, is still kind of impacting the CISO's chance of a credible and effective seat at the table, even as we head into 2026?
Hmm. Well, I mean, cyber professionals, CISOs, of course, among them, almost universally come from technical backgrounds, right? I mean, it's starting to change a bit, I guess. But and people with technical backgrounds sort of have spent their careers kind of working on technical skills, and so it's that kind of gap around communication. Now, the thing is, it does not mean that cyber professionals, still less CISOs, can't be great communicators. They absolutely can, and I know loads of them. But the fact is that you're kind of up against, you're fighting for influence with other senior people, and you're fighting for influence with people from a sales background who are great talkers. You're fighting for influence with people from a finance background who are on the kind of business metrics and the numbers like nobody else, and have that kind of credibility. um, you're competing with people who are, line of business directors, who are typically can talk really, really knowledgeable about the core business, whatever it is. And so CISOs, are kind of, they're having to struggle with everybody else, all of their peers, for airtime and to be listened to. Um, and it's forever. Cybersecurity has, that's your team is there. It's seen as the team to kind of give you the bad news and then to fix it, right? That's it. That's how senior people see them. So yeah, fine, all right. I'm expecting for you to tell me bad news, and you're going to say, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, this is all an absolute mess, and we need to do something about this. And I'm going to say, okay, John, like don't tell me the details, just go and do it. Or I might say, okay, John, I'm sorry to hear that, but we don't have enough budget, just suck it up. And so it's quite kind of, no, it's sort of transactional almost. It's too often that it doesn't feel like a partnership. It's not an advisory relationship, which is what it should be. And if you compare with a really top-notch kind of CFO or a chief revenue person, chief salesperson, what they will look to do is they'll be looking to create a kind of a genuine partnership, a sort of shared responsibility with their seniors, a sense that, you and I are both tackling the same business problem here. And, yeah, I have some challenges here in my domain. Um, but, I'm not necessarily just going to hit you with all of them because I'm a grown up, right? And some of this stuff I can manage, but I'm just going to pick the one thing which is really, really strategic, and actually only you as the chief strategy person can really help me resolve, and we're going to do this together. I'm going to support you and you're going to support me. So, that's what I think that's where we need to get to.
Absolutely. And just following on from that, you've been an advocate for, the more rounded professional, cyber professional, beyond the endless swathe of ever increasing technical certifications out. What is maybe the one key, sort of maybe non-tech skill that a cyber leader really needs to have in the, under his belt or her belt to be perceived, as a business peer, true business peer by CEOs and founders?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, it's hard to pick on one, right? I mean, I've talked about communication, what does that mean? I guess, okay, can I have two? Am I allowed to?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess one is a skill and one is more around knowledge, okay? But on the knowledge front, you have to be absolutely all over the business at a business level. So you have to understand what the business objectives are, what are the business challenges, what is all the stuff that the CFO is poring over and the head of sales, what keeps the CEO up at night. What are the non-executives worried about? Yeah, it's that business stuff that's really, really key. Because if you can't talk about, your problems in those terms, it's going to be really hard to get anyone to listen. Okay, so the second thing, we talked about communication. If I was going to put my finger on one thing, a skill which actually a cyber leader can go and learn tomorrow, and they can find courses and training and stuff, it would be listening skills. So, I mean, I mentioned earlier that one thing I did in my career, completely outside of my day job, was I became a voluntary counsellor, peer counsellor for a while. I did that for around 5+ years. And so when you learn counselling skills, the first thing that you learn is that you are an absolutely lousy listener. Vast majority of us are just terrible at listening. We think we're listening, but we're not. We're not. We're planning what we're going to say next. And so if you actually learn listening skills, like from a proper trainer or a proper course or whatever, you realize that listening is an absolute superpower. When you're genuinely listening, my goodness, you pick up on so much that just would have completely passed you by. There is this whole world of information. If only we can kind of, quiet our minds and open up to what other people are trying to tell us, or quite often not trying to tell us, but we're going to hear it anyway when we're listening. So it's a superpower for any professional, particularly for cyber people, because it's going to help them pick up on those signals which are often hard to spot otherwise, to understand things like which way politics is going in your organisation. Yeah, so it's a superpower, listening.
That's incredible. And look, for our listeners, both on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, if you've ever felt like your technical advice was ignored in meetings, we want to hear your story. So drop that, share your experience in the comment section and empower others. Now, Jessica, as we move on from that, let's discuss boardroom realities and resilience, your governance versus management. Where does board directors' responsibility end and the CISOs begin? And ultimately, how do we stop boards from being just checkboxes and start them being more macro governance resilience?
Mm. Okay, well, so in terms of the dividing line, so boards are so the fundamental about the board is the board delegates. Okay, so the board does not do anything itself; it delegates. And so if particularly a more mature board at a larger company, a listed company or a charity or a public body or anyone like that is going to have quite a sort of formal statement which describes what exactly it is delegated, and it will typically delegate to a CEO, and then the CEO decides, beyond that, where the CEO wants to delegate. Okay, so the CISO's role actually starts a few steps away from the board already. Even if let's sort of say the CISO might report into let's sort of say absolute best case scenario, maybe a COO. We don't like CISOs reporting to CTOs, but some of them do, unfortunately. So so they might report to a COO or a CFO, who in turn has to report to a CEO, who will then report to the board. So there's quite a few steps there, okay? But the board is all about strategy, oversight. It doesn't do, but it has to make sure certain things are in place. The board's role fundamentally is to ensure the success of the company. I think that's the way that it's expressed in corporate governance law, the success of the company. What does that mean? It has to kind of come up with its own definition. So the board is going to be setting out the strategic objectives of the company, the organisation, and that might be, for example, we want to grow in this particular way, we want to grow by a certain amount, we're going to do it in this way, we're going to go into this market, that market. Or it might be, to protect profitability, to prevent slide into decline and insolvency. It might be to all these kind of strategic objectives, but these are goals, what it's setting out to achieve. The board will also have to approve the CEO's plan to achieve those. So the strategy will typically be done with some board input, the CEO working with their team to kind of come up with a fleshed out plan. How are we going to enter into these new markets? How are we going to increase our profitability? All of the sort of tactical stuff. So, the CEO, the CISO is quite far away from there. Okay, so the closest link you get is in the field of risk management, because the board is the kind of has final responsibility for risk oversight, and the reason for that is it goes back to this mantra of the board being is there to ensure the success of the company. By definition, if there are any risks out there which are going to prevent that, either because they're going to cripple the organisation or they're just going to put out of business, then it goes without saying the board needs to be on them. So, of course, what this means is that you get this whole discipline of risk management. The board's view of that and the CISO's are really, really different. Okay, so the CISO's view of risk management is going to be very operational. I mean, very technical in their world, and pretty hands-on. And the CISO is going to be all over. Yeah, all right. I know there's this risk, this risk, this risk. What am I doing about it is the main thing. How am I reducing it? The CISO is in the world of risk reduction. That's what they exist for, to mitigate risks. But a board's view of risk is really different. It's strategic, so they have to focus on the most critical stuff only. And again, they delegate. So they want to know that whatever plan the teams have got to reduce risk, they just want to know that it's working. That's all. And there's a whole. I mean, this is what I do for a living right now. Okay, there is a whole world of reasons why it does not work very well for cybersecurity. Boards find it really, really hard to oversee cybersecurity risk. So it's an important topic for CISOs, bridging that gap. Finding a common language.
Certainly agree with, and we see a lot of businesses really still struggling to articulate what their risk tolerance is, what their risk level of risk acceptance is, and of course, that the bandwidth of their team. And hypothetically speaking, Jessica, if a company was breached tomorrow, we understand that I'm not the tech person. That excuse doesn't work now for directors, and board members want to educate themselves to be more proactive. So, what's some of the most critical questions that every board member should be asking their CISO to protect themselves and their own liability?
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, the question which most boards start off with is the wrong one, and it's not helpful. But I mean, it's better than no question, okay? So the first question they usually ask is, are we secure? It's like, well, how on earth are you supposed to answer that? Do you know what I mean? So, well, I don't know. What do you think? How do I feel today? Oh, I'm in a really bad mood. No, we're not. And like a lot of boards, it's this, they want reassurance. They want someone to tell them, yeah, it's fine. We're doing fine. So, it's not a helpful question. How do you answer that as a CISO? So, I think it's about starting a journey which is going to involve a lot more closer engagement between the two. Okay, so probably the most helpful question a board member could ask their CISO is, how can we work better together? How can we work more constructively together? A board member could ask, what do you think we need to know? A board member could ask the CISO, what's keeping you up at night? Yeah, it might be totally different to what they heard from the CTO or the CEO. It's really common in organisations where the CISO, is like on sleeping pills and it's really stressed out, and you get CTO, CFO, CEO who are all just thinking about something completely different and blithely assuring the board that oh yeah, Pete seems to have it. He's really Pete is great. Our security is brilliant. I mean that's quite a common scenario. Pete's going, it's not okay. Yeah, there's layers, all of those layers. So yeah, how can they get that connection working better?
Yeah, I think effective communication certainly helps with that. And I think, I know we live in a remotely based world, but that physical time together certainly helps to build bridges with inside the businesses. And look, a number of the events myself and Jay attend, and I know we're going to be seeing each other in London later this month, but we often hear that identity is a new perimeter. And of course, as we move into an era of agentic AI and ever increasing deepfakes, how does a board oversee a workforce which is human and digital, especially with identity being at the forefront of that?
Yeah. It's a real challenge, isn't it? So I was speaking to a board this morning, so it's just kind of in the not-for-profit sector, and sort of explaining that organisations and not-for-profit sector have a particular challenge you don't get elsewhere, which is that often it's not really clear who's in the workforce because they use so many volunteers. And so it's really common, big charities will have all sorts of identities, and actually nobody has a clue like who they are. It could have been dormant for 5 years, it could have been long since taken over by bad actors. So, that organisation may already have a workforce of compromised identities, by bots, God knows what. And that, as far as their tech goes, that is their workforce. So, I think, okay, so the board is not responsible for, executing identity management, or anything like that. Okay, this is a technical area which the CISO has to oversee. I think the board just has to be aware. They don't have to have deep technical knowledge. They just have to be aware of how quickly the environment is changing. And I think in particular, they need to be aware that there are decisions they make day in, day out, which look like they have nothing to do with cybersecurity, but which have cybersecurity implications. So, to give you some examples, the board is, heavily supportive of our big new digital product development, and it's brilliant, and we're building these fantastic things. Yeah, great. Okay, so I mean, has the board even asked the question about, what of that budget resource allocation is going to be spent on cybersecurity? Has the board even asked the question about who's leading that project to make sure that we're not missing this stuff? Is the board just blindly cheerleading the kind of deployment really, really quick of, sort of agentic AI in the workforce? You know what, your board is on the receiving end of so much marketing. I cannot tell you, they are all being absolutely spammed all the time. They're being taken out to dinner by vendors. And, I see there is often a lot of credulity. I think there can be in that group of people, and like a sense that they have to be sort of seen as being supportive, with innovation and new tech, and as a result, they're not asking the questions. They're not being cynical and skeptical and saying, yeah, this is great, but what if, So I think this is the thing. they need to be aware that cyber risk is popping up in all sorts of places that it wouldn't have before, and could be, and that they have to be, they have to be more kind of skeptical and more analytical, and use their own judgment a bit more with the kind of new areas.
I appreciate you sharing. And look, let's talk about the art of buy-in. Senior management often see cyber as attacks. How can CISOs reframe security spend so CFOs, for instance, see it as a revenue protector rather than a cost center?
Yeah, well, so there's a whole world, isn't there, of risk quantification. So where you can actually sort of put a figure on cybersecurity risk, and that's a really really good exercise to do. If you're part of a team that has the kind of resource to do that, because it can be a bit of a skilled job. And I think more and more we're going to have to do it this way, because otherwise what happens is that cyber risk just stays in this bucket of kind of opaque technical stuff none of us understand, and nobody really gets to grips with business impact. So I think that's really critical. There are areas where, for example, it might be that the organisation is looking to innovate, to go into new markets, to develop new products. Now, the fact is, if they hadn't taken into account cybersecurity, it might well be that some of those decisions are just so risky, that you can't really kind of go ahead. You might be asked to kind of go and work in new markets where, they're yeah, it's just gonna kind of bring so much more. It's going to increase the focus on your organisation and the attacks. So actually, seeing how we can mitigate that, seeing how we can create a kind of better sort of defence, a better architecture, might well allow us to take those slightly more risky decisions.
No, that's brilliant. I appreciate you sharing. And of course, you come here today with a wealth of experience, and we understand you help organizations navigate some of those challenges and some of the challenges we highlighted earlier. So if you'd indulge us, can you walk us through the visual framework that you yourself use to train boards, and why a simple diagram often is more powerful than 50 pages and slides from a risk report, for instance?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, this is one thing I use with boards, to really help them understand that there are lots of different ways that they could approach cybersecurity and cyber governance, and there's a good way, and then there are some less good ways to do it. Um, so, I think, I will say also that this picture, it could be used not just about cybersecurity, but you could describe any topic which comes to the board in these terms. Boards have different characters, they really, really do. Each board has its own kind of culture, its own way of operating. It will have different characters around the table, of course. You'll have different group dynamics. And somebody that's been on a number of different boards, all of us board members will be able kind of to describe boards which are higher functioning, worse functioning, more chaotic, better, more strategic, etc. And there's never a perfect board. But if you're looking at one particular board, before really it has started its cyber governance journey, before it's really thought about cybersecurity in a strategic way, oftentimes, probably the norm was for it to be avoidant, which is in this square in the bottom left-hand side. A board can be highly engaged with a topic, or it can just be not engaged at all. And a board can be very supportive or not supportive at all. So this board, the avoidant board, it's just not engaged with cybersecurity. It's just not interested, doesn't want to know, seems very technical and operational, would rather talk about other things. And it's also not supportive, which means is that it's just failing to provide enough financial resource. When asked, they're just kind of saying, no, maybe next year, ignoring it. And what they're doing is they're just delegating to executives. So that they're saying, okay, yeah, well, obviously somebody has to oversee this stuff. It's not us, it's beneath us. It's too technical. Okay, so they have a kind of negative attitude, and they don't even want to discuss it in the first place. So this is an avoidant board. I would say, unfortunately, probably this has been the norm, um, and probably more so in some sectors than others. I would say as well. Okay, so then you start to get more awareness at board level about cybersecurity risks, and this is a journey that I've seen personally because I co-founded CXB in 2023, and at that point, me and my co-founders, we knew what was coming. We knew that there would be a world which has materialised this year when everybody would know about Marks and Spencers and JLR and the British Library. But back in 2023, before the British Library had happened, most boards were still in kind of blissful ignorance. So at the point at which a board starts to become aware that it needs to do something, it can go into two directions, neither of which are ideal. So one board becomes a lot more highly engaged, but it's still not very supportive. And so this is the board that is micromanaging. This is the one which has the CISO running off here, there, and everywhere. Um, but random board members have read something in the press, or they've been pitched at a vendor, and they're sending emails to the CISO going, "Oh, what are we doing about the SEAM, or what are we doing about MFA?" And all this very detail focused stuff, which boards just should not be on. They should be confident that their CISO is on this. So this is a board which is kind of very reactive. Every single news piece they write, they're asking, "Oh, okay, what about this? What about that?" They're not being strategic. They're not looking at the big picture. They believe they know best. And unfortunately, this is the board which is going to say if something bad happens, they're going to point the finger at blame. This is the board which is going to fire somebody. So we don't want to go here. These boards can make CISO's life a misery. And do you know what? They are not doing their job. They are not being strategic. They're going to way much detail. Okay, so then you might get another board which is actually very supportive, which is a really nice board, which is not going to blame anybody, which really, really gets it, but which is still kind of passive. It's not engaged. So this is the board which says, if a proposal comes to them for some, financial investment, they'll say, yes, yes, absolutely. What do you need? We'll sign the check. Um, but they're not engaging, so they're operating what I call trust-based governance, which is and that this is well, our CISO Pete, oh, he seems like a really great chap. He's very, very smart, seems to be on it, really happy just to let him get on with it. It's trust-based governance. Well, that's great. That's nice, that's nice. But like, what about poor old Pete? Where's the support for him? You know what I mean? It can't just be about the person. And so this board is just not really giving the support it needs for deeper change. It's missing opportunities. And so finally, where we want to get to is we want a responsible board up there in the top right hand corner. So responsible board is highly engaged and it's very supportive. It's left all that blame stuff behind them. They understand this is a team sport. We take joint responsibility. They're not going to leave it all up to Pete. They're saying, okay, Pete seems great, but look, this is about assurance, okay? And we want to see evidence. And it can't just be down to one person. That's not fair. They're leading a very positive security culture. It's all about, okay, great, great work. What can we do now? Where can we go next to make this better? What can we do? And they're offering informed challenge and support. They do not have to be technical. They still don't. But if they are going to challenge, it needs to be informed. And most of the time, this means is that like I said, nitpicking away at little risks and repeating the stuff they've heard in the press, not necessarily very helpful. But informed challenge. I'll give you an example. Let's say as a board director, I see a copy of the organisation's the CISO cyber strategy to approve. What questions could I ask? Almost certainly, if I ask a technical question, it's just going to be I don't know any more than my CISO. My CISO is the expert. So what could I ask? I could say, all right, well, you've chosen to do this. What other options did you consider, and why did you reject them? That's a question I can always ask. Now, straight away I can see, all right, well, did they consider anything else? Well, why not? And what else is out there? What's your thinking on this? So there's all sorts of ways a board can be really, really supportive. They can help to challenge, they can help to develop and support. They can make a CISO and their team, their overstretched, stressed out team, understand that they're valued, but also offer that stretch. So there you go. That's my framework.
No, I appreciate you sharing. And for those that are listening and watching, we will put a link within the description so you can get a copy of that. And of course, some of the other resource Jessica and the team have there. But to our audience, let us know in the comment section, is your board currently level 1 or level 4?
And Jessica, we talk a little bit about, I guess, different perspectives. And we touched on earlier that you've chaired major charities such as NCT. Is there a particular, maybe one survival tactic, from your time in the charity sector where budgets are zero, as is becoming the case with more and more organisations now, but that certainly some of the more fortunate, bigger corporations should adopt without fail immediately?
Guys, it's really hard to answer. I mean, just because I know what I would say, but would anyone take my advice on this? I'm not sure they would. The one thing that the charity sector has in spades is mission, and a level of commitment from their people because of that mission. Yeah, and I mean, charities, other social impact organisations, they have this incredible. When you go and sort of speak to their people, they have this incredible unanimity. I mean, outside, okay, the most absolutely horrific, dysfunctional charities, which definitely exist, everybody understands what they're there for, right? And often they can point to their beneficiaries, and they will give you stories, the people who they exist for, and there's this level of commitment. Everybody there understands their role in keeping that beneficiary safe, or all of these kind of things. And it's a sort of level of, we talk about singing off the same hymn sheet, don't we? I think so many organisations now are so big, and so many companies so big and impersonal, and
Just not got that emotional buy-in, have they?
that emotional connection. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. But, what I do observe is that lots and lots of companies, people are kind of committed. They're kind of committed to their team. So even if the bigger kind of mission of the company doesn't necessarily inspire you, selling more widgets, whatever it does, actually, a lot of the time, people really, really are committed to their colleagues, and particularly, people who've been around for a while. Obviously, if you work there on a permanent basis as opposed to being a freelancer or a contract or whatever, you see that more. So I do think I think it's often really, really overlooked in companies, and how that could be a real kind of force for good. And like I said earlier, in cybersecurity, where you have this level of integrity and personal responsibility, which I don't see in any other profession, in all honesty. And that, God, I mean, that's gold dust. Why aren't companies doing everything they can to look after these guys? It's like they've got their own kind of little private army and they don't even know about it.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. And talk about the social impact, beyond the balance sheet. How can boards, be more responsible for their cyber resilience? How can they extend, the online safety, protecting the broader civil society? We've seen, some strides made on this, but how can that be, more effective from the board's perspective?
Well, this is such a good question. It's something which is really close to my heart, actually. I worked on the Online Safety Act, well, when it was the Online Safety Bill. So with colleagues, we did all of the kind of technical advisory that led to that piece of legislation, which was quite groundbreaking, actually. I think Britain was the first country worldwide that passed legislation regulating online platforms for the first time. So it was great to be able to work on that. And I guess, I came away from that reflecting that, I think now we all know a hell of a lot more, don't we, about the potential harms that can happen on social media and how, truly kind of horrific things can happen online. And there's a whole world there of kind of bad actors, as we know, who will exploit social platforms to whatever they're doing, whether it's, reaching out to kids, whether it's exploiting vulnerable people on online dating apps, for example, romance fraud, all of that sort of stuff. There's a whole world of kind of online promotion of terrorism and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we understand now that social media platforms they have what we call a duty of care now, which is sort of written into legislation. And so that idea, the duty of care, means that as a social media platform, you understand that you're not just there to run a great business for the benefit of your own shareholders. You have this duty of care to broader society you operate in. You have a duty of care to the people who use your platforms, and because of that, you have these duties to look after kids, to stop this bad stuff happening. But you see, the Online Safety Bill, the Online Safety Act, is very, very specific about that duty of care. It says they have a duty of care towards children. Yeah, that's cool. We all understand that. And adults in certain situations. But beyond that, that's as far as it goes. And I think because at the same time this was happening, of course, all of the stuff with the post office, the Horizon scandal, and the postmasters were coming out. Now those of us who work in the tech industry have been following that story about the postmasters' battle for justice with the post office for decades, actually. And I think Computer Weekly has been reporting on it since 1998 or something like that. So it's been kicking around. And as somebody who's been working in tech industry since the 90s, I feel really, really strongly that any organisation which operates a platform, a technology platform, which is everyone, which is every organisation, has a duty of care to its users. Now think about that. If the post office all those years ago had this idea that they had a duty of care to their users, it would have fundamentally changed how they dealt with those postmasters. Because when they started complaining that they were seeing sort of payments disappearing for accounts, etc., back in the 90s, somebody would have said, okay, well, we have a duty of care to these guys, and what's the potential harm here? The potential harm is that we're going to go after them for fraud wrongly, and they're going to end up really, really, really hurt. Duty of care would have prevented all of that. You can't legislate for every bad thing that might happen as a result of tech failure. You just can't. But this idea of a duty of care, it's something which operates at board level. It's just an implicit assumption. So I would love to see this idea of a duty of care just applying to everybody. I think that every board should be bearing this in mind. They should remember that as an organisation of any size, you operate a large number of digital systems now, used by your own employees, used by your customers, used by your partners. You have a duty of care. What are the harms lurking there? Think about it. Take responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly a huge topic, and we'd love to hear from our audience and community members on that. If you think boards should be held accountable for their social impact, be sure to hit the like button, and you can ensure that we have more conversations on this, in the future. And Jess, if you would indulge us some quick fire questions, a few scenario based things, and I think it certainly would add value to our listeners and our community members. The first being, 30-second challenge. So the CEO says to you, we have insurance, we don't need any more tech. How do you respond to that?
Well, the insurance will cover some of the costs. So, it'll cover the cost of cleanup, but all it does is that it doesn't cover the costs of the opportunity cost, does it? So, if your sales team can't sell anything for 6 months, or you don't have a service to offer, for 6 months, Well, the insurance is not going to cover that, are they? The other thing is that staring into the face of what a cyber incident looks like from a board perspective, it's absolutely horrific. I mean, as somebody here who's chaired a board that was going through a crisis, I mean, you can't do anything else. You are tied up. All your best, most important people are tied up in in this kind of horrific thing, and it goes on for years, as we know. So good luck to you, CEO, because you're going to be doing nothing else except working on the incident when it happens, and you will probably end up leaving the business.
Appreciate you sharing that harsh reality. And another question is the missing piece. What's the biggest lie boards tell themselves about their own resilience?
We're doing fine. We're okay. We're fine. Pete says it's fine. Yeah, yeah. Nobody's fine, for goodness sake. I mean, all of us, we speak to CISOs, don't we, of big, well-funded, well-resourced, mature organisations. Do they feel fine? No, they don't. No one is fine. Everybody should feel uncomfortable. Feeling uncomfortable is okay, actually. That's the truth. It's okay to feel uncomfortable.
It certainly is. And next question, the Monday morning action. What is one overlooked challenge a CISO can address this Monday coming to immediately change how their management perceives them and their teams?
Well, they could, if they're asked to do cyber reporting to management, they could have a think about better ways to report. A lot of reports focus on kind of activities, don't they? We've done this, we've done that. Well, that's all very interesting, but what impact did it make? And what's the one big thing that the CISO wants the CEO to know this week? Give it 2 sentences. What's the impact?
Well, that's brilliant. And look, as we come to the back end of the session, of course, we often speak about the importance of collaboration, encourage knowledge sharing, cross-sector, for instance. And Clarion Events Cyber Leadership Summit certainly embodies that. I know we've met, I think it was Manchester, I've seen you last, and myself, Jay, will be attending on the 28th of January in London. We understand that you're going to be speaking at the Financial Services Cyber Leadership Summit. So what topics are you going to be looking at covering during the upcoming summit?
Yeah, so I'm moderating a panel discussion on the CISO's role. So a lot of what we've been talking about today, actually. So I really love the Cyber Leaders Summit. It's a lovely community because it really is CISOs only, and it's where they get that support. It's so valuable for me to hear what's happening. And I try to be that supportive voice, like I try to be the advocate who's been on the other side of the table and might be able to help them speak the board's language.
That's brilliant. And why are events such as the Cyber Leadership Summit vital for both leaders and aspiring leaders?
Yeah, it's being part of that community. It's understanding, what are you seeing, comparing it to what others are seeing, putting it into the bigger picture. I think working in these jobs is hard, right? It's high pressure, highly pressured. It's often very, very stressful, and you can get caught up in your own company politics. So actually, to be able to take a day or two out and go and hear your peers' experiences, there's a sort of element of kind of self-help, emotional support, which is so important. And honestly, you only get that from your peers. And because they're from other organisations, people can talk really honestly, can't they? In my experience, there always is a lot of very, very honest sharing.
No, that's brilliant. And look, we appreciate closed door spaces. More often than not more valuable than just vendor-led events. But ultimately, it's a safe place to build trust and gain awareness without a solution being shoved down your throat. But you do get the opportunity to connect with vendors. So, from a vendor perspective, for instance, why are these events important to connect with CISOs and security leaders?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important for vendors. I mean, vendors. I mean, I've worked a lot with vendors as well, and they often have a kind of bit of a one-track mind, and vendor salespeople have targets to meet, and can end up seeing these things in kind of quite transactional ways. And you have a product, you want to push it. Well, you have to learn from somewhere about your market, right? And it 9 times out of 10, it turns out that your market is not at all interested in your product. They're talking about loads of other stuff, and it's really, really important for you as a vendor to understand that. It might be that your product needs to shift a bit, or it might just be that you need to be a bit more kind of humble and think more carefully about how your product is going to fit in the real world. It's about the operational use of these products.
And look, we talk a lot about the next generation, Jessica. We've talked a lot. We've done a number of episodes on this previously, and obviously talking about early years and security with obviously the younger individuals in society. If you had maybe on the spot a quick 60-second warning to every parent globally about the biggest digital mistake that they're making, most universally with their kids right now, what would you say?
Well, it's a hard one. I mean, I've got kids, right? And I'm not a perfect parent. It's absolutely impossible to control kids' digital usage past a certain point. You can go a certain way with all of the parental tools, and some of them are quite good. And if you're a strict person like I am, but you can't control them forever. I suppose the biggest thing I worry about personally as a parent is with Gen AI now. Um, it's the fact I worry that we're just moving into a world where it's just the truth on any matter is just being completely hidden under an absolute deluge of AI slop and bullshit and stuff that's just been made up. Um, and that sort of thing about kind of believing what you read. I think media literacy is so important that even the term media literacy, it just sounds boring, doesn't it? It's a school kind of term. And it's like, yeah, somehow this is going to solve the problem. We're going to give them a couple of lessons, delivered by teachers that know absolutely nothing about digital and are going to get it laughably wrong. So I don't know. I think this is it. I think all of us have to just constantly talk to our kids to help them to reflect on, yeah, okay, yeah, you've read that. How did you know that was true? So talk me through the process, all that kind of stuff. Evaluating information. We can't just rely on schools to do it. They won't do it.
Yeah, I was saying earlier today, I think authenticity and the truth has never carried a higher currency than it does at the moment, for sure. And if a teenager maybe turned to you and said, look, how do I stay safe online without living in fear or anxiety? Again, impossible to answer, completely. But would there be any tips you could give them?
Yeah, I think spend time in the real world. Do as much as possible as you can in the real world. I see this actually with my older daughter, who tells me that doing stuff in real life has become cool again, and I hear about they're doing sort of listening parties where they listen to actual proper LPs, old vinyl records and stuff, and no one's allowed to bring their smartphone. It's brilliant. And the other one tells me about there's cosplaying and Ren fairs and all that sort of stuff. So it does feel like there's a bit of a kind of resurgence. So I think that's the thing. It's the antidote. I think the more you're online, the more you get dragged down rabbit holes, and the more you do have, it becomes an emotional experience, and you have all of these feelings and stuff, and it starts to create its own reality. And the answer is just to step away.
Yeah, it's all gone full circle. I don't think I've seen more Polaroid cameras and old-fashioned cameras at Christmas this year than I've seen for a long time. They've been creeping in for a few years, but we've just gone full circle, like you say. Vinyl, everything's just gone full circle. But yeah,
They're really expensive as well. We were looking at a Polaroid the other day in Urban Outfitters. They want £50 for it. I think you get 12 shots.
The difference between this time and last time, for sure. And look, just to finish off, what do you think? Some of what's probably one of the biggest mistruths that kids or younger people, should I say, maybe are who are looking to get into cyber or STEM. What's the truth that nobody's telling them? We know it's tough. We know it's never been more difficult, and we know there's bigger challenges than before. What are the truths that maybe nobody's telling them at the moment?
Okay, so the single biggest lie is that you need to kind of you need to have that linear career path. So you do like computing A levels, and then you go and do computer science or cybersecurity degree, and then you do it like that. So that is the biggest lie. So if you look at most senior experienced people in cybersecurity today, none of them would have done that. They did all sorts of stuff. You look at like probably the biggest place where people come from is the military, right? These are people who often left school at 16, okay? And yeah, people come into cybersecurity from so many different backgrounds, Government is doing all of these, has got tons and tons of apprentices now that have come into cybersecurity roles from being midwives and firemen, So, and I think actually these other career paths, it's so important that we have more of them because they actually feed the diversity of the profession. They make it stronger. When you have more different types of people, they think differently. So yeah, so that's the single biggest lie. You can get into it. There's lots of routes into it.
Absolutely. And look, just talking a bit more about obviously CXB. Could you talk us through a bit more about what you've been doing with CXB, its mission, its purpose, and what the future holds for you guys?
Yeah, so CXB is a non-profit. So I set it up with three others, and we set it up because we got together and we've been talking about it for a while. I brought together a bunch of people who are all non-exec directors from across a number of sectors, and who all, for various different reasons, had an interest in cybersecurity. And my kind of thought at that time was, I'm worried at just how little attention boards are paying to this. Am I seeing, is anyone else seeing that? And yes, everyone was seeing that. And we had like a lot of experience to share. We carried on talking about it, and we're like, someone ought to do something about this. Someone's got to set something up for boards and for board members to really, to really kind of get them up to speed with this. And we were like, yeah, someone should. And it's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, all right, yeah, we better do it. So we did it. So CXB has been, we just run it entirely on a voluntary basis up until now, really. So every month we have a sort of Chatham House rule a sort of session, interactive session. So any non-exec director can come, any sector. So we have people from charities, banks, public sector bodies, all sorts of stuff. And we'll just take a topic and we'll talk through it. The whole thing is non-technical. It's totally focused on governance. So there is this thing called cyber governance, which it wasn't a thing not long ago, and we're helping to bring it into existence. The government published its cyber governance code last year, so we've been working with government quite closely to kind of get it out there, to get it into boards' hands. And so now what we're doing is we've just started to do more formal training with boards. So we're working with individual boards and we're kind of running these interactive sessions. We're helping them action plan. We're helping them to evaluate how mature they are, to sort of compare them, against a framework. And yeah, I mean, what we really want to do is we want to reach all boards in the UK. That's what we want to do. So we're really ambitious, and we're trying to build a model with some scale. So yeah, watch this space. Hopefully, we'll be helping everyone.
And how can we, our audience community, how can we help you with that?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, if any sort of CISO, senior cyber professional, if they have sight of their board, and they want our help to engage them, just get in touch. We would love to talk to you. There are things right now that we can do for your board. If your board doesn't want to engage with us, then I still want to talk to that CISO because we can still help them. So just, drop us a line.
And how can people get hold of your best sort of, for people who want to stay connected beyond the episode? Where else can they reach you? LinkedIn, of course. Anywhere else?
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn is great. Yeah, we've got the CXB website as well. Just drop us a line on that.
Jessica, amazing. want to say a big thank you. Really, really good stuff. Fascinating insight, and great to see the framework and everything you've been doing. I'm sure the community, all our listeners, will have found a huge amount of value in today's episode. As always, if people want to continue the discussion for more sustained engagement, we invite you to join the community, where we offer a range of collaborative solutions to tech and security professionals at no cost. Thank you very much, everybody. Great episode. We look forward to seeing you again on the next.